Hello and welcome to the final episode of season 1 of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Eldawi. And today I'm joined on the sofa with Majdel Musa, who is a legal expert. So we decided to wrap up season 1 with do's and don'ts, how to keep yourself out of hot water, things you should know as a real estate agent or aspiring real estate agent. To keep you on the right side of the law. Welcome, Majdel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So we're gonna, some people might think it's a boring subject.
Can be, yes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of detail and, as a true professional, you don't have to know everything, but knowing as much as possible about the basics is fundamental to truly being a professional and giving the correct advice. What's your opinion? What's your stance on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are so many times that I've heard or even read, so people, my friends of friends, even random people who follow me on social media will send me their emails from their landlords or the brokers that deal with them, the property managers, et cetera. And it's astounding how much the real estate professionals don't know.
Yeah.
And they even have so much arrogance when they're talking about it.
And confidence, like, no, I'm giving you the right information. But Majdel's been in Dubai since 2014. Her Dubai career started at Dubai Land Department. Yes. What did you do there?
So I was working under the Dubai Real Estate Institute, and it was under DLD, and I was teaching the RERA legal courses, so the legal segments of the RERA course.
So if you recognize her voice or her look, it may be like, where do I know her from? She probably taught you your RERA course. And yeah, when it was in person as well, you were doing it in person, and now it's all online. So
mostly, yes. They've actually privatized the courses because they closed the DRAI in 2020, and now there are private institutes that offer.
And you work for one of them, which is Thinkprop.
Correct.
You're an instructor. Still teaching RERA, do's and don'ts, and how to pass the exam, basically.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so today I'd like to touch upon the basics, and I'd say we've got a lawyer here or legal expert. We have an opportunity to kind of really fine-tune or get into the detail of some of the important contracts that a real estate agent will come across. And I think the first contract that they will interact with, that it's important to get right, is their employment contract. So you will enter your career as a real estate agent via a brokerage. They will send you a job offer. You're in the height of your excitement. You've landed a role. You'll probably just skim through the basic terms of the agreement and see some kind of a few legal clauses, and you'll just sign. But you need to understand the meaning behind some of these clauses, and some of them are not even enforceable. So depending on the severity of them, it might also give you an indicator as to the culture that you're about to enter or the type of employer that you're. So let's just talk about a couple of what they call it in legal terms is restrictive covenants. So that is basic. I mean, what is a restrictive covenant? I'm not going to try and translate it, but yeah.
So the things that you cannot do, right? So basically we're talking mostly about non-competes, non-solicitation, non-poaching.
Confidentiality agreements and this. Okay, so let's start by talking about one that's a little bit controversial is the non-compete.
Yes.
So one thing that I see in a lot of templates is you cannot work for, once you leave this company, you cannot work for another brokerage ever again. Okay, or another company similar to us ever again.
Competitors.
A competitor. Yes. And that really gets some people shook. It gets them scared, like, oh my goodness, I'm signing royalty, like a lifetime royalty agreement with one brokerage. So let's talk about what that entails and whether it's enforceable or not.
Yeah, so it depends on what part of the world you're in. So definitely if you're talking about the US or the UK, for example, yes, they're very highly enforceable. They are enforced against employees. But here in the UAE, they're not as enforceable. It depends on certain circumstances and what's in the non-compete.
Because there's an argument that, this is your livelihood and no employer can stop you from continuing your profession, what you've, become an expert in, with a competitor. So is it more a kind of deterrent from leaving, or is there an actual threat? I can understand when it comes to higher management or C-level suite positions that, there might be like a 6-month calling period, or they might put you on gardening leave if you leave, or if you resign, or if they're terminating you. But for your typical real estate agent, is there any merit to this clause in the employment contract?
Yeah, so in the UAE, under the new labor law, which came into effect in 2022, they actually do say that it can be 2 years in length. But in reality, what we've seen historically anyway is that the UAE courts do not, unless, like you said, they're very high level, very senior position, they usually do not enforce it because there has to be also a legitimate business interest to have this non-compete. So unless they have very high level information, very important trade secrets or something along those lines, there's no real reason for them to enforce it. Also, it has to be limited in the scope too, right? So it does say 2 years under the law, but what we've seen, again, historically in courts is that they prefer it to be 6 months or less. Also limited in geography. So not all of UAE, and sometimes you see all of UAE, all of GCC, the whole world. I have seen one with worldwide, which is insane.
You just have to
You just
drop
can't work ever
and,
again. Yeah, so yes, so it has to be usually limited to the emirate in which they were actually working, the employee. So,
but it's important to note that kind of in practice, it's very rarely pursued.
Correct.
Unless you have taken, or you're taking trade secrets, or big clients, or unless you're moving from one brokerage to another brokerage.
Yes.
You could be moving on good terms, and generally it's going to be okay. But if you're doing it in a sneaky way, or you're going to cause some kind of financial loss to the brokerage that you're leaving, they could then enforce that clause.
Yes. So also with the non-solicitation of the clients and non-poaching of other employees, so you can't take your colleagues with you, for example, those are more likely to be enforced in the UAE, but the company does have to prove that there were actual damages. So it's not enough to say, oh, we would have made this much commission with this client that you took. It has to be actual damages, so it's very difficult to prove and to enforce.
Yeah. Okay. So, but in general, it's not a clause that anyone should panic about, especially if they're working in a company and they're not happy with their training, or they're not happy with the way it's going. They shouldn't feel like they cannot move to another.
No, I wouldn't. It costs the company a lot of money to actually enforce it, or try to enforce it even, because you're talking about, so you're going to go to court, you have to pay the lawyers, you've got to pay the court fees, and then it goes through 3 levels. There are 3 levels of the court, so the appeals, cassation, etc. And so what happens is that by the time that's all done, the 2 years have passed, and in the meantime, the employee has been working for the new company the whole time. Okay. So it turns out to be a waste of time and money.
Okay. Actually, maybe we should have started this episode with a disclaimer that this episode should not be construed as legal advice.
Yes.
Anything you anything you do as a result of this is
it's all for informational purposes.
Entertainment purposes only. No, but we are going to try and give you some real guidance and steering, because it can be scary when you see these clauses and when you're thinking of leaving. Yes, you made a very good point. Some of these companies have invested in training and so on, and that is another clause that you'll find in employment contracts, is that if you do leave within maybe your probationary period or ever, they might claw back your visa costs and your training costs.
Yes.
How enforceable is that?
So let's start with training first. So training could actually be enforced. Yes, they can claw them back if there was actually training provided. So if it says, and it has to be in the agreement as well, if it says that you will pay for any training done and there was no training given, obviously there's nothing to pay for.
Does it matter if it was an in-house trainer or an external trainer?
If they spent money on training, then yes, then
Okay.
they can enforce it.
Okay, and then the visa costs?
Visas, absolutely not. The employee never pays for the cost of the visa.
Even if it's in the contract?
Even if it's in the contract.
Okay. Even if they leave after 3 weeks after the visa's been issued?
So what the labor law does say is that if they leave during probation, the new employer is supposed to pay the visa costs to the old employer.
Okay.
However, as to whether or not that's enforceable and easy to enforce is a different story.
Okay, so if you're a real estate agent and you've just got your visa issued by one company and then you're thinking of leaving, you should probably negotiate with your new employer to absorb those costs as part of your transfer package,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about non-poaching. So by poaching, that's, moving to another agency and then immediately taking one of the administrators, the receptionist, or one of the other agents, getting them to come with you. Now, that is a problem. And that can be enforced?
Yes.
As long as you prove a loss?
Yes,
or-
so the burden is on the employer to prove that there were actual losses due to this. So again, it's very difficult to do, time consuming, costs a lot of money to pursue, et cetera.
But in terms of best practice, you should probably just let it lie for about 6 months before you start talking.
Most of the contracts have about 12 months for
Okay.
the solicitation of former
Of
colleagues.
poaching of staff,
Yeah.
non-poaching. Okay, so we've got that clear. Non-compete, I mean, it's there, but it's unless you're unless you're just leaving on good terms and you're not going to do any, cause any financial damage to the previous company, you should be fine. Non-poaching, again, give it a year before you start bringing your ex-colleagues over to your new company. Visa and training costs. So visa, no, they cannot deduct it from your final salary. Training costs, they can deduct from your pay as long as it was in the contract and they can demonstrate how much they spent on your training.
And that it was actually done. Yes.
And it was done. And they can't just charge you for training of 20 people. It would have to be pro rata, I guess.
Correct.
Okay. And then you've got there's also another kind of non-solicitation that people don't talk about is clients. So part of being a real estate agent is building your network, building your database of buyers and tenants and sellers and landlords. So if you were at one brokerage and you amassed a network, technically they are clients of the brokerage, not necessarily the agent.
Yes.
So where do you draw the line when you switch agencies?
I mean, here's the thing. You can't also stop people from following you, right? If your clients want
Like
to follow
you.
you,
They wanna deal with you,
anywhere that you go, you can't stop that as well. But if you're actively pursuing them, then that may become a problem again for you if the employer decides to pursue it.
And worst case scenario, if, for example, you took a client or you actively pursued a client, they closed a deal or signed a contract that should have gone to the previous agency or was already signed with the previous agency, you could face being sued up to the value of the lost contract, right?
So again, it depends, because also the commissions that could have been made, these theoretical things, are not actual damages. So it really just depends on what stage it was at, et cetera. So.
Okay. So let's move on to the next contract that a real estate agent will probably encounter at the beginning of their career, which is the tenancy contract.
Yes.
So a lot of people think, oh, leasing is easier than selling, and it's just, but actually it's probably way more legally complex than selling.
Oh, definitely. Actually, there are way more rules
And
more
laws and
involved.
regulations.
Yes, and even besides what's written in the law, the practices of the rental dispute center are also different as well. So there's a lot more to learn about tenancy, I would say, than even sales.
Okay. So one thing that tends to happen quite often is you have clauses in tenancy contracts that conflict with the law.
Yes.
And we call this, or there's a saying, statute overrides contract. That's a very important. I learned that very early on in my career. Statute overrides contract. What does that mean? Whatever is in the law, whatever is written in the law of your country or emirate or state, whatever you put in the contract, you can, say the complete opposite in a contract. And if there is a law about that particular clause, that will always take priority.
Yes.
So you could, I always used to get, I used to hate dealing with tenants that were lawyers because I knew they were going to argue about every little clause, just to kind of throw their weight around and be like, I know that this is incorrect or whatever. But actually, if I was a lawyer, I would just be signing blindly.
By the way, I do that. I laugh. I'm like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah. Try and enforce that. Yeah. So it's like, but you don't need to kind of throw your weight around because you already know that if that's against the law, it's not going to apply. So I can just sign it.
Exactly.
So what are the strange things that you've seen in tenancy contracts that are just ridiculous?
I mean, not so strange, but very, very common is seeing that it's non-renewable. It's 1 year only.
Okay.
Right? And under the Dubai tenancy law, actually, there's an automatic right of renewal that the tenant has unless there's a reason for eviction.
So there is no way I can say, I just want to rent this property for 1 year. So can I serve an eviction notice on day one of the tenancy?
So yes, the eviction notice can be served on day one as long as it's done correctly, which we'll discuss.
Through a notary public.
Yes.
So just putting in a contract that it's non-renewable, not enforceable.
Correct.
Okay. Tick. What else?
So we also see, what else do we see in the tenancy contracts? I mean, that's the main
one
thing that we see that's against the law. Also, you sometimes see that there is sort of an eviction notice in the contract itself, and you see even some of the big developers put that in, that this serves as eviction notice, and by signing this lease that you've agreed that you've been served,
non-enforceable.
has to be done properly. So not enforceable as well.
And where does that tenant stand at the end of the 12 months? Let's say they just signed blindly. 12 months is over. Hello, you're moving out because you signed this eviction notice. You can say, no, I'm staying, I'm renewing.
Yeah, you could say no. And if they refuse to give you a new lease, there's a process called offer and deposit through the land department that can be done, where you take 2 copies of a new lease on the same terms as the previous year, and then you deposit that with the checks with the rental dispute center.
So it's probably wise to sign that kind of agreement that contains a non-renewal clause, because you're probably not going to get a 90-day notification of rent increase, correct? So it's a good way to just ensure you're going to have 2 years at the same rent. Okay. And we also teach you here how to bypass. No, I'm joking.
Disclaimer.
Okay. And eviction notices have to be done.
Yes. So interestingly, the law actually says it could be done either by the notary public or registered mail. However, rental dispute center practice is that it has to be done through the notary.
Okay, fine. So that's
spend the extra money to do that and get it right.
And there are only 4 reasons that you can demand eviction.
With the 12-month notice.
With the 12-month notice. And this is important for, even if you're not doing leasing, this is important advice that you need to be giving sellers as well. Because I think I've heard a lot of agents just saying, oh yeah, you can give 12 months notice. You can, or this tenant's paying, let's say it's an investor and you're selling a rented unit, but the tenant's paying a low rent. The advice is typically, it's okay, we can evict this tenant and get you market rent on the next tenancy. That's a big no-no. Why?
Yes, because what is happening, so if it's discovered that the landlord is re-renting within 2 years of the eviction happening, what is happening currently, so this is the current practice, it can change.
As of September 2023.
So what's happening currently in the rental dispute center is that the tenants are being awarded 1 year's worth of rent.
Okay, so let me get this right. So I'm a landlord. I've evicted my tenant because I'm not happy with the rent that they're paying. And I immediately re-rent it to someone else. I then, if my previous tenant takes me to court, I'm liable for 1 year's rent.
Yes, yes.
The whole.
Whatever they were paying
Okay.
in that previous year, that's what you're
Okay,
going to
so
give
it's
them.
not worth doing.
No,
it's not worth
going
doing.
to eat into your profit,
Yeah.
if not kill it altogether. Yes.
So the 4 acceptable reasons as of September 2023 that you can evict a tenant in the UAE.
So in Dubai, actually.
In Dubai,
'cause
okay.
Every emirate has their own laws, but as for sale of a property, and that's just the desire to sell. They don't
Okay.
actually
Have to have sold. Okay.
it. And also then if they want it for personal use or that of a direct relative, but they have to prove that they have no other place in Dubai to live in.
Yeah, so they can't have a portfolio of properties and insist on that
Exactly.
relative. And does it have to be a first degree relative?
First
or it can
degree,
be,
yes.
Okay.
It has to be
First degree relative
yes.
only, not a friend or...
No.
Because that could be considered renting
No.
again. Okay.
Yeah, not a friend. just
And it would
first
be a
degree.
non-ijari tenancy effectively.
Yes.
Okay.
So then also demolition, if they need to demolish, and then major remodeling.
Okay.
So major renovation, but that actually comes with the requirement that they have to go to the municipality and get a technical report saying the work has to be done.
Okay.
And then with those last two, so with the demolition and the major renovation, they actually have to give the tenant the right of first refusal to move back in at market
Interesting.
rates.
Okay. All right. So that's protecting the tenants. Going back to the first one where you mentioned it's the intention to sell.
Yes.
Let's say I intend to sell. The tenant, I've evicted the tenant. They moved out. It's been on the market 2-3 months. I still haven't sold it. Can I rent it then? Or do I still have to?
Here's the thing. If you end up renting it, then the tenant still has a case against you, right? But you have to have proof that you actually attempted
To sell.
to sell it. So if you have, for example, a Form F that fell through, perhaps,
Okay.
you've been doing viewings,
Fine.
etc. So you have to have proof of it.
Okay, cool. Would I have to give that tenant first right of refusal to re-rent it as well, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of landlords do that just to avoid having a dispute.
Right, next one that's a tricky one is rent increases. So you have the RERA rental index, you have the law, which is maximum rent increase 20%. Doesn't apply to service apartments though, or hotel apartments, I believe. Okay, and what's the correct rent increase procedure?
So it has to be given 90 days prior to the expiration. Now, the law says unless otherwise agreed, meaning that if it's in the lease stated otherwise 60 days or 30 days, whatever it might be, that they actually are enforcing the 90-day notice.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And in line with the RERA rental index.
Correct. Now, there is a way around it. So because the RERA index is only updated about 2 times a year, so it is a bit behind. And so if the landlord feels it's not in line, the RERA index, with the market
Current
rate,
market.
they can do what's called a valuation certificate. They can pay, it's about 2,000 dirhams, and they can ask to see what the market value is and then take it to the rental dispute center and let the judges decide how much they can increase.
The increases, okay.
Yes.
And is there any precedent that's been set on that, or any case history, whether they enforce it or whether it's still a maximum 20% or?
No, they are these days because, again, the market has shot up. They do actually give, if they have the market information and it's more than 20%, they have been giving it. Not all the time.
Okay.
It depends, again, on the factors of the case, but we have seen it, yes.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to hot water. So as a real estate agent, you also have a lot of responsibilities and obligations to serve the nation, the greater
Absolutely.
economy, the, counter-terrorism, and it's a big responsibility for someone who's just trying to sell houses, but you are part of the system that is responsible for anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism, and so on. So I'm an agent. I just started out. What should I be looking out for? What should I be like so that I don't end up in jail, deported, or with a huge fine? What would the top 3 pieces of advice you'd give
get
to
licensed.
me?
That's
Get
where we
licensed,
start.
number 1. Okay.
I mean, that's a lot of people are skipping that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Even people on
certain shows.
certain reality TV shows going around saying that they're real estate agents, but they're not licensed. But anyway.
So get licensed for sure, so that you do learn what the laws are here. And then also check the circulars. So RERA always issues circulars. Some of them are specific to licensed individuals, and some of them are more general that talk about different topics in the market. So make sure you stay up to date. You can go to the Land Department website and look under rules and regulations for them.
Because these circulars will typically be sent to your managing director, sales manager. They should be forwarding on to you.
Is the key.
They may not.
Yes.
So stay on top of DLD website, the
Dubai
Rest app
Yes.
as well. You get a little notification saying there's a new circular.
You can look under legislation on the Dubai Rest app, and you'll find all of the circulars issued there.
Okay.
So
And typically like 1 a month, or how often are they?
it's not. It's just whenever the market needs it
Okay.
that they come out with something. So
Fine.
it could be a few a year. It could be only one a year. Depends.
Okay. So get licensed, get the Dubai Rest app, AML, KYC, DD. Let's talk about those.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I don't even think when I talk about AML, anti-money laundering, for the real estate sector, a lot of agents don't even know that it exists. So the UAE AML laws have been in place since 2018, but there are really a lot of follow-up circulars and other regulations that have been issued, and specifically there was one issued last year for the real estate sector called the Real Estate Activity Report, REAR. So that involves the agent has to report whenever a transaction is paid in cash in 55,000 dirhams or more, whether it's a one lump sum payment or broken down into smaller payments, which is nothing, right? 55,000, I mean, rents
that
are
could
more
be
than
that could be the first check of your rent.
Exactly.
So, but if you're paying cash, what do I have to do as an agent?
Yeah, so I'll finish what the requirements are. So if it's 55,000 or more in cash, if the buyer was using cryptocurrency to pay for it, so cryptocurrency, NFTs, any kind of virtual assets, basically. Or if they took virtual assets and converted them into cash or any other type of payments to do the transaction, basically.
Okay.
Then they've got to report this to the to the Financial Intelligence Unit, the FIU.
So there's another thing that you have to be careful of is tipping off, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're going to give me 55,000 in cash, I'm not going to tell you, oh, by the way, I need to report this on the government system.
No.
You're just supposed to do it, right?
You're supposed to do it, and not only that, but what happens if you do tip off,
That's a crime as well.
Yeah, imprisonment and or a fine.
Okay. So you might be kind of thinking you're doing the right thing and, telling your client, oh, by the way, because of, this transaction is over 55,000, I have to report it. But innocently, it could be completely innocently, but there is a red flag that they call tipping off. If you're telling this person who we're treating it as though this person is suspected of money laundering. If you start telling them that what you're going to do, just as part of the procedure, that's considered tipping off.
Yes.
Which is also a crime in itself.
Correct.
Because you're then complicit in the laundering of money.
Yes.
Because you're kind of supporting that happening. So you've just got to do it as a course of action.
Yeah, you have to do it. And if you don't report, even if it's not the real estate activity report, if you suspect that the transaction is somehow involved in money laundering or the funds came from criminal act.
But, you know, I'm an agent. I'm just an agent. I'm really desperate to close this deal. I don't want to kind of cause any hiccups or delays. The person looks respectable. What do I do?
I mean, you have the duty to do this, and you have to report it. You're supposed to. So your company should have a compliance officer. That's one of their duties under the AML laws. And you have to report it to the compliance officer, and they make the decision whether or not to actually file the suspicious activity
And how long
report.
does that process take? So let's say I file someone's paying me $55,000 cash. I just file a suspicious activity report. How long until I get approval to go ahead?
So it just depends on how soon the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit, gets back to you, because they may actually have to confer with other authorities. They might have to do a lot of investigation, et cetera. So there is no real time frame for that. And so it is what it is. And you actually have the duty, if your client starts getting suspicious that something's going on because it's taking time, you have to keep making excuses.
Yeah.
And then if they start to act really angry about it or irrationally,
That's also a red flag.
that is a red flag, and you have to report that as well. So there's a lot of reporting that has to be done. Yes.
Okay. All right. So crypto. There's a lot of people going around saying, I can pay in crypto. Is that a thing now?
I mean, it's allowed, and it's being encouraged. And Dubai government, for example, came up with the VARA, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. So it's actually being encouraged. But at the same time, yes, you also have the anti-money laundering regulations, and you do have to report if it's being used.
And what about KYC, which stands for Know Your Client?
Yes.
How well do I need to know my client?
So under AML laws, it's called customer due diligence, CDD. And yes, you have to, of course, collect. I mean, these are things when you're onboarding clients anyway that you should be collecting, right? So the Emirates ID or the passports, if they're not residents here, all of these things. If it's a business, they've got all of their corporate documents you've got to collect. So,
But I wouldn't do that at the early stage. I'd only do that at the, when we're signing an MOU.
no.
You should be doing it at the registration.
You should be onboarding the client, because if they're a high-risk client, then...
Or what is it, PEP? Politically exposed person. Okay.
Yes. Or they might be on sanctions list, either the UAE or the UN sanctions list. So you're supposed to be running all of these sanctions screenings from the beginning before you even onboard them. Because again, if
Before I even go on a viewing?
If you hit any matches, you've got to report that too. If their name matches anybody.
Can't I just rely on my company to run the names on the CRM?
The company should be doing it, right?
Okay.
Because again, there's supposed
this
to
sounds
be
like
a
a lot of
compliance.
responsibility for me.
Yeah,
okay,
no.
God.
There should be a compliance officer again that's doing that, or has a team that does these types of things. But this should be done from the beginning of the relationship. You shouldn't be just finding out who your client is when you're going to transfer.
Okay. And are we just checking buyers, or are we checking sellers too?
All parties. All parties.
Landlords, tenants?
Everything, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a lot of work.
It is.
Hard work. But the punishment is?
So imprisonment, and it depends. There are different punishments for different things under regulations. So imprisonment or fines, and we're talking, and I mean, depending if it's an individual or company, and again, what kind of violation that they've done, but could be, up to 5 million or 50 million for a company, and then closure of the company, et cetera. So, yeah, it's a lot.
So I'm an agent. I've just joined a new company. What should I be asking? Like, do we have an AML officer? What questions should I be asking to make sure I'm working for?
Yeah, I would definitely do that. Make sure that your company is in compliance. Do you have a compliance officer? Have you registered with the FIU? So actually, the Ministry of Economy has recently announced that they have suspended 50 companies for 3 months.
Real estate companies?
From all of the DNFBP, so the designated non-financial businesses, and the real estate falls under that. And so they suspended them for not even being registered on the Go AML portal.
Okay.
So that could happen.
Can you check if your company's registered on GoAML?
So again, it's not public record, so you're going to have to ask your company and rely on them.
Fine. Anything else on AML, DD, KYC, DNFPD?
Lots of letters. Right?
As a newbie real estate agent, what else should I be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, learn the laws, and also know what your limits are as a real estate agent. You're not a lawyer. Yes, you should know the laws, but don't play lawyer.
Yeah.
This is not Suits, you know. Don't play.
Don't play Harvey. Yeah.
Exactly. Or Mike.
Yeah. And it's what I kind of noticed, or there's a tendency, especially in salespeople, to have an answer for everything.
Yes.
And even if you don't know the answer, don't make it up, because this is your credibility. And actually, it's more respectable if you say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out and I'll come back to you.
Exactly.
So don't give the incorrect information just because you need to give some information.
Yeah, never. Don't do that. Just tell them you'll get back to them and then find out the correct information.
Okay. Something is happening in the industry that I heard about. And not that I don't want to appear to be alerting anyone to this practice, but we should be warning against it. And that is, if you have an employment contract with a company, you are a registered agent licensed under a brokerage. Let's say, for example, they're offering you 50-50 commission. You've got a big deal in the pipeline. You know another agency owner or brokerage owner, they're ready to give you 70 to 80% of that commission. So how does the industry prevent this malpractice of closing outside, closing with other agencies, and really get a grip on brokerage loyalty?
Yeah, so I mean, that's for the agency to fix itself, right? So the heads of these agencies need to be aware of these practices and need to stop it, nip it in the bud and stop it from happening, because it is in violation of most likely not only your employment agreement, because most likely it says you're exclusive to this company, but also the immigration rules, right? You're not supposed to be working outside.
For two companies at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, there are new kind of permits and things like that in place, but it's unlikely that you have it in this situation. So don't do it.
Okay. Maybe we should delete that whole part, because maybe I've just given someone an idea, and we're not here to hurt the industry, but apparently it is happening.
No, it is. I've heard of it.
I spoke to a very respectable agency leader, or I thought they were, and they were like, "Yeah, I'll do that. I'll close that deal. No risk, very little risk." But from the agent's perspective, I would kind of remind them that the industry is whilst it's very big, it's very small, and everybody knows everyone. And you will, like 9 times out of 10, you will get caught. If it's not today, tomorrow, down the line, and that will just ruin your, credibility, your reputation, and you'll be ruined.
It's not worth it for the extra whatever percentage you're getting.
Yeah. So just stay loyal, stay true. Don't be naughty. Okay. What else? Legal.
So what else do we have? We have due diligence. So we talked about customer due diligence, which is one part of due diligence under the AML laws, but just due diligence in general with your transactions. So what is due diligence? It is basically doing your homework. So it's taking reasonable steps to avoid making a mistake that could cost any party financial loss.
Okay. Let's have a real life example of bad due diligence and the potential repercussions of it.
So, for example, let's say if you don't verify the seller on the title deed, and you have a client who is giving a check, the deposit check, and this person who you thought was the seller runs off with it, and now your client has this financial loss because you didn't verify.
do your due diligence.
Yeah, and it's super easy. You go on the Dubai Rest app if you have the title deed number, plug it in, and it will show you
The name
whether
of
or
the
not.
owner.
So super easy to do, takes a couple of minutes. And since 2016, this actually has been required by RERA. There was a circular issued in 2016 saying that all agents have to verify the title deed.
Okay. And what due diligence checks should I be doing on a prospective tenant?
So with the tenancy, I mean, you can check their, obviously you're going to check all of their residency and the
Emirates
Emirates
ID.
ID, passports and
Yeah.
things like that. There is something under the rental dispute center now where
Certificate of good conduct or
good
something.
conduct certificate. So you can check on both tenants and landlords.
Okay.
So if you kind of have an iffy feeling about a prospective landlord or a tenant and you want to check if there are previous cases against them, you can actually do that through the RDC.
Okay. And you don't have to even have a sneaky suspicion. Maybe it's good practice
Yes.
to just provide the good conduct certificate when you're putting forward your offer, right?
Yes.
And just saying, look, we've checked out this tenant. Here's his passport. Here's Emirates ID. And we took the liberty of getting their good conduct certificate, so you can rest assured.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of time. I think it's not very well known yet.
Okay.
So once people start to know about it more, that might actually just become a normal occurrence.
And if you've bounced a check or, damaged a property, would that be something that would appear on the good conduct certificate, or it's only if a case was filed against you?
If a case
Okay.
was taken, yeah.
Fine. So it's not necessarily a guarantee for good conduct.
Correct.
It's just that there was no case filed
Taken.
against this person or this landlord, this
Yes.
tenant or the landlord. Okay. And that's a good word, actually, guarantee. That as a legal expert, you should...
Never guarantee anything.
Never guarantee anything.
Especially, please, not ROIs.
Yeah.
I hear it all
Don't
the time. There's a
guarantee,
guarantee 9% ROI. Are you kidding? How do you have a crystal ball? So how do you know what's going to happen next month, next year?
Don't guarantee a rental amount. Don't guarantee capital appreciation.
You could say
Just-
historically, this is what's happened.
You can
We
give
expect this, but we cannot
expectations,
guarantee that kind
expectations, predictions, but never guarantee. Okay,
Exactly.
unless there is an official kind of guarantee that comes with the developer. Or
Even then, I'm
Even then?
shocked that
Okay.
they're the ones giving it, so that's the liabilities on them.
okay,
I bet it's a little bit shocking that they would do that.
so be it. What else should I know, or what are the common questions that you're asked in your training sessions?
So, mostly around tenancy laws, I would say. I think that's the most confusing thing to most people. Because again, yes, the laws say one thing, and then sometimes the decisions that come out of RDC are a little bit different from that, or the practices change, et cetera. So, yeah, a lot of rental
Gray
dispute
areas.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where most of it comes from. Also about off-plan projects and things like that. Yeah, so there was an interesting case that recently came out of Dubai courts. And in 2021, RERA had issued a circular stating, among other things, that the developers have to allow buyers to get their own inspectors. So before you had to rely on the developers' inspectors
Doing the
which
snagging and
may or may not come out with the correct results.
Or, we'll give you 5 out of the 10 requests.
Yeah,
We'll
exactly. And then also they have to actually fix whatever's on the report and then allow the buyers back in to make sure the work was done. So developer did not actually do the work or allow the buyers to see that the work was or wasn't done. And so the court actually found they were in violation and refunded all the funds back to the buyer. So that's something interesting.
They cancelled the deal and he
Yes.
got all his money back.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Fine. What else? I think we've checked off quite a lot.
I think so. I think we
Employment
covered
contract, we got you covered. Non-compete, non-solicitation, non-poaching, visa and training costs, tenancy laws, eviction notices, rental increases. AML, DD, KYC, DNFPD, which is, what was it? Department of...
No, it's designated non-financial businesses and professions.
Non-financial businesses and professions.
Yes.
Circulars, the REST app, do's and don'ts.
Yeah, covered
Just-
a lot. I think
just-
that was the whole course in how
In-
many minutes?
45 minutes. Just behave and do not
Exactly.
guarantee anything. And if you do not know the answer, please do not pretend to be a lawyer.
Oh my God, please.
Just get legal advice or Google it. Half the
No,
answers are on
I-
Google. No?
No, be
You don't
careful.
like
that
that?
Google
Okay.
degree is
Mhm.
not always
The Google
the
degree.
best one.
I mean, I have a Google Masters as far as I'm concerned, or a YouTube Masters, but yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much,
Thank
Majdel,
you
for
for
joining me on the season finale of Golden Nuggets with Silvia Al-Dawi. Thank you. We'll be back. In fact, you won't even notice a difference. You won't even, there's such a seamless transition from season 1 to season 2. So new episode out every Tuesday. We're just calling this season 1 because I wanted to have a season finale. But there will be a season 2. There will be a new episode next Tuesday. Like, share, and subscribe.